The fluorescent lights of Morrison and Klein. Financial hummed their familiar tune as Sarah Martinez clutched her 6-month-old daughter closer, feeling every stare like a knife. The whispers started the moment she stepped off the elevator, harsh, cutting words that followed her down the corridor like shadows she couldn't shake. Can you believe she brought that baby to work again? Third time this month. Completely unprofessional. I heard she doesn't even know who the father is. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she kept walking, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor with a determination that masked the trembling in her hands. Little Emma gurgled against her shoulder, blissfully unaware that her mother's world was crumbling with each whispered judgment. The daycare had called an hour ago, another stomach bug sweeping through. All children sent home immediately. Sarah had no family in the city, no backup plan, and a presentation due by end of day that could make or break her career. She'd thought, perhaps naively, that her colleagues would understand, that in a company of 200 employees, someone might remember what it meant to be human, to face impossible choices between keeping your job and caring for your child. Instead, she'd found only cold shoulders and crueler whispers. Jennifer from accounting actually laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that echoed in the break room. Must be nice to get special treatment just because you made a mistake, she said loud enough for everyone to hear. Sarah pretended to focus on warming Emma's bottle, but her vision blurred with unshed tears. The mistake they referred to was the most beautiful thing that had ever happened to her. Emma, with her dark curls and impossibility bright eyes, was the only light in Sarah's life after a year that had taken everything else. Her mother's death, her broken engagement, and the one night of comfort that had unexpectedly led to pregnancy. She'd never told anyone who Emma's father was, partly because it was complicated, mostly because she didn't think anyone would believe her. "Sarah, conference room now." The voice belonged to Marcus Webb, the company's operations director and resident bully. His expression was stone as he pointed down the hallway. "This is getting out of hand. We need to discuss your situation." Her situation, as if being a single mother was a disease that needed curing. Sarah gathered her things with shaking hands, whispering soft reassurances to Emma as they made their way to the conference room. Through the glass walls, she could see a dozen faces staring, some amused, others disgusted. She felt like an animal in a zoo, put on display for everyone's entertainment. Marcus didn't waste time with pleasantries. "This is a professional environment, Sarah, not a daycare center. Your personal problems are affecting team morale." "Team morale?" Sarah's voice was quieter than she intended. "My daughter is sick and I have no one to watch her. I'm still doing my work. I've never missed a deadline." "That's not the point. People are talking." "It looks bad." He leaned forward, his expression hardening. "Maybe this job isn't the right fit for someone in your situation. Maybe you should consider something more flexible." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. He was firing her. Actually firing her for being a mother. Sarah opened her mouth to respond, when the conference room door suddenly swung, open with such force it rattled the glass walls. Every head turned toward the entrance. Alexander Morrison III stood in the doorway. The CEO of Morrison and Klein rarely appeared on the operations floor. As the grandson of the company's founder and the youngest CEO in the firm's 70-year history, Alexander was more myth than man to most employees, a figure glimpsed in board meetings and quarterly announcements. Always impeccably dressed, always untouchable. At 34, he'd taken a legacy company and transformed it into a financial powerhouse, earning both respect and fear in equal measure. Now he stood in the doorway of a mid-level conference room, his tailored navy suit somehow looking out of place in the fluorescent lighting, his expression thunderous. "Marcus!" His voice was quiet, controlled, but Sarah heard the steel underneath. "What exactly is happening here?" Marcus stood so quickly his chair rolled backward. "Mr. Morrison, I was just addressing a personnel issue. Nothing that requires your... I asked you a question." Alexander's eyes moved past Marcus to Sarah, and for just a moment, something flickered in his expression, something that looked like pain. "What issue are you addressing?" "Well, Ms. Martinez has been bringing her child to work repeatedly, and it's creating a distraction for..." "A distraction?" Alexander walked into the room, and Sarah noticed his hand was trembling slightly. He stopped a few feet from her, his eyes fixed on Emma, who had turned to stare at the newcomer with curious, bright eyes. "Is that what you call a 6-month-old baby who needs her mother?" The room had gone utterly silent. Through the glass walls, Sarah could see people gathering, phones out, sensing something significant unfolding. Marcus stammered. "I'm simply following company policy about—" "What policy?" Alexander's voice rose for the first time. "Show me the policy that says an employee can't care for their child during an emergency. Show me where it says that being a parent is grounds for termination." "I never said termination. You said she should find something more flexible. We both know what that means." Alexander finally tore his gaze from Emma to look at Marcus, and Sarah saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. This wasn't just a CEO defending an employee. This was personal. "Everyone out," Alexander said suddenly. "Everyone except Sarah." Marcus hesitated, then practically fled the room. Along with the 2 HR representatives Sarah hadn't even noticed entering. Through the glass, she could see the growing crowd outside. Their faces pressed close, everyone desperate to understand what was happening. Alexander waited until the door closed, then turned to face her fully. Up close, Sarah could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the tension in his jaw. He looked like a man carrying an impossible weight. "Hi, Sarah," he said softly, and just like that, she was transported back 18 months to a hospital waiting room, to the worst night of her life, to the stranger who had sat beside her and held her hand while her mother died. "Alex," she whispered, using the name he'd given her that night. Not Alexander Morrison III, CEO and heir to a financial empire. Just Alex, the man who had been visiting, his own dying father when he'd found her, sobbing in the corridor at 3 in the morning. "I didn't know," he said, his eyes moving back to Emma. "I didn't know until 2 months ago when I saw your personnel file during a random audit. Your emergency contact information, your address. I recognized it. I remembered." His voice cracked slightly. "And then I saw her birth date, did the math, and I tried to tell you," Sarah said, tears now flowing freely. "I came to your office the next week, but your assistant said you were in London for a month, and then I found out I was pregnant, and it seemed impossible. You're you, and I'm the woman I haven't stopped thinking about for a year and a half." Alexander took a step closer, then stopped himself, as if remembering where they were, who they were. "That night, Sarah, you saw me. Not the CEO, not the Morrison heir, just me. A man who was about to lose his father and had no idea how to handle it. You sat with me until dawn. You listened to my stories. You made me laugh when I thought I'd never laugh again. And then we comforted each other," Sarah finished quietly. They'd both been grieving, both been desperate for connection, both been so achingly lonely. Emma chose that moment to reach out her tiny hand toward Alexander, making a cooing sound that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet room. He looked at her like she was made of starlight and miracles. "Can I?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah nodded, unable to speak, and watched as Alexander carefully took Emma into his arms. The 6-month-old studied his face with serious eyes, eyes that Sarah suddenly realized were the exact same shade of gray as his, then broke into a wide, gummy smile and grabbed his nose. Alexander laughed, a sound of pure joy and wonder, and Sarah saw tears streaming down his face. "She's perfect," he said. "She's absolutely perfect. And I've missed 6 months of her life because you were too afraid to tell me and I was too blind to see what was right in front of me." "I wasn't afraid," Sarah said, wiping her own tears. "I was realistic. What were you going to do? Abandon your company to play house with the random woman from the hospital? You have responsibilities, a reputation. I wasn't going to trap you with—" "Trap me?" Alexander looked at her with such intensity it took her breath away. "Sarah, that night changed my life. I looked for you everywhere, but you disappeared before I could get your last name. When I finally found you in our employee records, discovered you'd been working here for 3 years, had been pregnant and alone while I was 15 floors above you the whole time, completely oblivious." He shook his head, his hold on Emma tightening protectively. "Do you know what these past 2 months have been like? Watching you from a distance, seeing how they treat you, knowing I caused this and being too much of a coward to approach you." "You're not a coward," Sarah said firmly. "And you didn't cause anything." We both made a choice that night. I should have tried harder to reach you, but I convinced myself you wouldn't want to know, that it would ruin your life. Not want to know? Alexander carefully sat down in one of the conference room chairs, cradling Emma against his chest like she was made of glass. Sarah, I have a daughter. A beautiful, perfect daughter. That doesn't ruin lives, it gives them meaning. He looked up at her, vulnerability written across his features. I know I have no right to ask this. I know I've missed so much already, but please, let me be her father. Let me be there for both of you, not because I have to, but because I desperately want to. Sarah felt something break open in her chest, all the fear, the loneliness, the exhaustion of carrying everything alone for so long. She sank into the chair beside him, their knees touching, their daughter between them. She has your eyes, Sarah said softly, and your stubborn chin. She hates sleeping and loves numbers. I play counting games to calm her down. I think she's going to be brilliant like her father. She has your courage, Alexander countered, reaching out to brush a tear from Sarah's cheek. And your strength. You've been facing down a building full of judgmental people while raising a baby, alone and excelling at your job. That's not just brilliant, it's superhuman. Outside the glass walls, the crowd had grown larger. Dozens of faces pressed against the windows, phones recording everything. Tomorrow, this would be all over the company, probably all over the financial news. CEO, discovers secret baby with company employee. The headlines would write themselves. Alexander seemed to realize it at the same moment. He looked out at the gathered crowd, then down at Emma, then at Sarah. I need to address this, he said. All of it. The gossip, the treatment you've received, everything. But first, I need to know. Is there any chance, any possibility that you might give us a shot as a family? Sarah thought about that night in the hospital. How this stranger had held her hand and made her feel less alone. She thought about the past 6 months of struggling alone, convinced she had to be strong enough for two. She thought about Emma, who deserved to know her father, to grow up surrounded by love instead of whispers and shame. I think, she said slowly, that we owe it to her to try. Alexander's smile was bright enough to light up the entire floor. He stood carefully, Emma still secure in his arms, and extended his free hand to Sarah. She took it, feeling the warmth and strength there, and together they walked to the conference room door. He opened it to face the crowd of employees, their shocked faces and raised phones. Without hesitation, Alexander addressed them all. I'm going to make this very simple, he said, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd run boardrooms since he was 29. This is Emma Martinez Morrison, my daughter. Her mother is Sarah Martinez, who has shown more grace and strength in 6 months than most of us show in a lifetime. Effective immediately, Morrison and Klein will be implementing comprehensive parental support policies, including emergency child care, extended leave, and flexible work arrangements. He paused, his expression hardening. And anyone who has a problem with that or who has made Ms. Martinez feel unwelcome in this company can see HR about their severance package. We don't employ bullies. We employ humans. The silence was deafening. Then, from somewhere in the back, someone started clapping. It spread slowly at first, then built into genuine applause. Not everyone joined in. Jennifer from accounting looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. And Marcus had disappeared entirely. But enough did that. Sarah felt the knot in her chest begin to loosen. Alexander turned to her, his expression softening. What do you say we get out of here? I have 18 months of stories to catch up on, a daughter to get to know, and a future to plan. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper only she could hear. If you'll have us, Sarah, if you'll let me prove I can be the man you both deserve. Sarah looked at her daughter, contentedly drooling on the CEO's expensive suit, then at Alexander, this man who had stumbled back into her life at exactly the right moment. She thought about the hardest year of her life, the loneliest nights, the moments when she'd wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. But looking at Emma, she knew she'd never regret a single second. Let's go home, she said simply, and watched his face transform with joy. As they walked toward the elevator, Emma nestled between them. Sarah heard the whispers starting again. But this time they sounded different, amazed instead of cruel, curious instead of judgmental. The story would spread, she knew. The single mom and the CEO, the secret baby, the fairy tale romance. Let them talk. Let them whisper. She had everything that mattered right here. In the elevator, as the doors closed on the gaping crowds, Alexander kissed Emma's forehead, then looked at Sarah with such tenderness it made her heart ache. "Thank you," he whispered. "For her. For being strong enough for both of us when I didn't even know we existed. For giving me another chance." "Thank you for not running away," Sarah replied, allowing herself to lean against him, to share the weight she'd been carrying alone. "For choosing us." "Every day," he promised, wrapping his free arm around her shoulders. "I'll choose you both every single day." And as the elevator descended, carrying them away from judgment and toward something new and uncertain and beautiful, Sarah finally let herself believe in happy endings. Not because they were easy or guaranteed, but because they were built by people brave enough to try.